Hello and welcome to the Columbus Metropolitan Club. Hello. I'm Steve Marks, the chair of the CMC board and president of Hannah News Service here in Columbus. Today's CMC annual Harrison Smith Legacy Forum that recognizes the contributions Bill Smith made to our community. Some of Bill's family are here today. Could you stand so we can thank you? Thank you. We are sponsored today by many organizations, Otterbein, Smith & Hale, Steptoe & Johnson, the Crane Group, Cover My Meds, the Columbus Partnership and One Columbus, MKSK, ACOM, Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, WCMH, NBC4 are all sponsors today. Can we thank them? Now, please help me welcome the Otterbein University president, John Comerford, to the stage to introduce our forum. John?
Well, thank you, Steve, and thank you to the Columbus Metropolitan Club for having us. It is my great honor and duty to introduce our special guest today, Columbus Mayor Andrew Ginther, and to start by congratulating him on a very, very hard-fought re-election campaign. It is testament to his leadership that he was unopposed and that some of you in this room might not have even known that he just was reelected. But it's a really remarkable thing that Columbus politics was as drama-free as it was this election cycle, and it's thanks to his steady management of our city. In fact, the most political drama in Central Ohio lately might have been at the Otterbein University when we hosted the Democratic presidential debate. I was happy to see Mayor Ginther at the debate, and I'm glad we got to showcase Otterbein and Westerville and all of Central Ohio to the whole world. While Otterbein had the right facilities and staff to pull it off, what really attracted the DNC and CNN was all of us, our region and our strength together, that pulled that off. We are in Central Ohio, whose growing diverse economy and an unemployment rate well below the national average is thanks in no small part to the visionary leadership of Mayor Ginther and others, who lead with a regional view. Otterbein is fortunate to be in Westerville, whose 40,000 residents, 3,000 businesses, and 71,000 jobs make it one of America's great small cities. And of course, we're always proud to show off Otterbein, whose beautiful campus, proud history of pioneering equality in education, advocacy for equal rights, and our innovation in higher education today make it a leading liberal arts university. It seems I'm seeing a lot of Mayor Ginther lately. Just before the debate, he visited our campus, and we were proud to show off something we call The Point, where we have a dozen companies working hand in hand with our students and our faculty doing R&D projects, creating jobs in the future together. The mayor's interest in that type of innovation was no surprise. His record as mayor has brought innovation to everything from the way we move about our region with the Smart Columbus system to the way we care for our most vulnerable citizens, babies born into fragile health circumstances who increasingly have a better chance at life thanks to his leadership. Even though Otterbein may not be in Columbus, we know the mayor is a partner as we address shared issues like access and affordability and workforce development. He knows we will rise or fall as a region, not a city. We are lucky to have this leader working and serving us, and I hope you'll join me in welcoming the Mayor of the City of Columbus, Andrew Ginther, and our other special guest and moderator, Colleen Marshall, a legend in her own right, NBC4. Thank you both.
Well, we are going to get right to the interview. Strap yourself in. The first question is, why don't we have a police chief yet?
We have a very fine interim chief. His name is Tom Quinlan, and he's done a great job for the people of Columbus as interim. And I'm really proud of this process. I'm grateful to Dawn Tyler Lee, my deputy chief of staff, and her team that have run a process for the first time in the state's history that actually engaged the community on the front end, what they wanted to see in our next police chief. During the process, we had a community advisory group that helped screen and work with our consultant who looked nationally. This is the first time ever in the city's history we've even looked outside. And I think Columbus is the 14th largest city in the country, a city that's on the move, a city of the future. We deserve the best candidate, whether he or she comes from within the division or outside the division. And I think we have two outstanding finalists that came in and did a community meeting at East High School a little while back. And I'm continuing to talk with folks in the community and hear from folks about these finalists. And we're blessed. We have two outstanding choices, Mr. Tarrant and Mr. Quinlan. And you'll be the first to know when I make that
I better
decision.
be. How much money has been spent on this? As you said, it is the first national search for a police chief. How much does it cost taxpayers?
You know, my guess is for the national consultant, for the forms that we've put together, it's been in the neighborhood of $10,000, $25,000. But I think it's important. I mean, we don't spend any more money than we do in the Division of Police and Fire. And, you know, it's our top priority as a city. And I think, you know, having the community engaged, writing the job description, helping to interview and screen the candidates, being able to ask the candidates questions in public, important things, and I think well worth the investment.
You know, there's been speculation that after you announced and launched this nationwide search and saying that you are going far and wide to get the best candidate for the job, it's almost as if you've put yourself in the position of not being able to stick with Thomas Quinlan, because it would be like, well, why did we spend all that money and time for a national search if we had someone here in our backyard? Was this a fait accompli?
I don't know if I agree with the premise of the question that, you know, the people of Columbus needed an acting chief. You know, Kim Jacobs retired. We needed a chief. And I think the rotation of chiefs that's been done in the past, I'm not sure has served us as well. We needed one person who was in charge day in and day out, and we had a very competent, capable interim chief, Tom Quinlan. And so taking our time as a community, having a conversation about what we wanted in our next chief of police. The bottom line is the people of Columbus have been very clear. They want a change agent. They want a reformer. There is not a culture that values, appreciates, and promotes diversity and inclusion within the Division of Police. The Matrix report, and you look at all types of evidence. That's reality. That's what people are experiencing, both our officers, who are African American and women and LGBTQ, as well as our residents. There are major disparities about experiences and their involvement with the Division of Police. And we need a leader that's going to help transform and change that culture.
You know, the Matrix report did point out some disturbing findings about the view that the citizens of Columbus have about not just diversity, but the incidence of use of force that they believe that the report shows is more prevalent among minorities. Do you agree with that finding, and how has that shaped your decision making?
Well, the bottom line is a lot of what we saw in the Matrix report are facts. They're not perspectives, they're not opinions, you know. And I think particularly as a community, when you discount or explain away somebody's experiences, you're taking away their humanity. Racism exists. It exists in your newsroom, in my mayor's office, and in the Division of Police. And our job as leaders is to acknowledge that it exists, acknowledge people's experiences, and then own the remedy. That's our challenge. I don't need to own the history, but I need to acknowledge it exists, and as a leader, own the remedy.
So you didn't make the wrong. You didn't make the wrong, but you believe you're in the position now to do right.
I own the right. The people of Columbus have elected me now twice to own correction.
Right, let's talk about, if we could, development in Columbus. And we are seeing right now in neighborhoods like Linden and the Hilltop, Franklinton. At one time, no one would have envisioned those being neighborhoods for investment, for development, for home development. What is changing to make that a possibility, to make Cleveland Avenue a corridor for possible investment?
Well, I think it's been the incredible people of those neighborhoods that have committed to putting together comprehensive plans. It's the One Linden plan in Linden, and it's the Hilltop Rising plan that'll be coming out in the next couple of months on the Hilltop. It's been the leadership of our neighbors saying, this is what we need. We're committed. These are folks that stayed in these neighborhoods for decades when, quite honestly, a lot of people were leaving and companies were leaving, and there was lack of investment in infrastructure and other basic needs. And those neighbors, we want to control and own the future. And there's a lot we can learn from them. And we knew from the very beginning that we couldn't just plop down out of City Hall, put a plan together and do this really, really hard work without first listening to the people of those neighborhoods that have made them so great. And those are folks that you can see their fingerprints all over these plans and their priorities and their objectives, and they're going to be our partners in implementation and holding us accountable to make sure that we're organizing and galvanizing the entire community, the public sector, the private sector, nonprofits. I couldn't be more excited about the future of Linden, the Hilltop, and our other opportunity neighborhoods, because this entire community has stepped up in major ways. We just recently announced in partnership with chain developers that are making significant commitments into Linden, not just in more affordable housing. We want mixed income neighborhoods throughout the city. Linden needs more market rate housing and market rate amenities. And we know that there are half the people living in Linden now than there were in 1970. So we can enhance and improve the housing stock, make the neighborhoods safer, and really capitalize and leverage the great people that have made Linden so special.
One of the places where housing has changed significantly is downtown Columbus. In particular, we can see the high rises right there on North Bank Park.
Through the snow.
Through the flakes and birds. But, when those buildings were built, the tax abatements that were given to developers that were then passed on to the people who were able to afford these expensive condos caused a lot of resentment in some quarters. There was an entire political campaign in the last election for city council. Wasn't very well funded, so it didn't get very far, but they had a message that was resonating with a lot of people. Why are they getting abatements when there are people who have invested money in neighborhoods like German Village and Clintonville, where taxes are skyrocketing and there's no abatement for them? So how do you justify giving abatements at that income level?
Well, here's the bottom line. No one likes incentives or abatements. I mean, there's nobody out there that says that these are the key to the future. The bottom line is, if we don't incentivize with TIFs, abatements, and other partnerships, we're unilaterally disarming against competing folks around the region and around the country. What we need to do, and what we've done through our study process and changing our incentive policy for the first time in this city's history, is have it reflect our public policy goals. And so now, if you want to receive an incentive or abatement in partnership with the city, you have to make sure that affordable housing is part of that development, if it's a residential development. And if it's commercial and office space, that you're investing back into the community in ways that are going to help improve the quality of life of folks in neighborhoods. It also helped us realize that there were certain places in the city that didn't need the full level and incentive and abatement that might have been in place for a longer period of time. Clearly, the Short North and other places around the city don't need the same incentive and abatement today without these restrictions for mixed income housing and helping us build mixed income neighborhoods that they did probably in 1980. And I was just meeting with our interim development director today, and I think we're going to review that now every couple of years. With all of the growth and changes that are taking place, I think we've got to be looking at those in incentives and abatements and making sure that we're continuing to incentivize the right type of development with density and mobility and mixed income availability much more frequently than every 5, 10, 15, 20 years.
You know, you look at neighborhoods like Franklinton that not too long ago was just known as the place where the homeless shelter is.
Or the bottoms.
Or the bottoms. And now Franklinton is kind of the hipster neighborhood where it's a good place to go hang out on a Friday and Saturday night. And because of that, because of the bars and the restaurants that are emerging there, there's housing now emerging there. But anytime you have that kind of development, the people who had lived there are pushed out. And their neighborhood becomes unaffordable for them. What is the city doing to really tackle the affordable housing crisis that's hitting not just Columbus, but Franklin County? Because there are people with money. If you have houses for sale in the suburbs that are going the day that they're for sale, but affordable housing is very difficult for a lot of struggling families.
Well, first of all, I want to make sure we understand there's a distinction between East Franklinton and West Franklinton. Because West Franklinton is one of our opportunity neighborhoods and has the highest rate of infant mortality of any neighborhood in Central Ohio. So there are still major, major challenges for West Franklinton. East Franklinton, you're right, has seen a great deal of private investment and public-private partnerships and really created an incredible, thriving, creative, live, work, create space that a lot of folks are interested in being part of. I think a critical component to being able to impact residents who have made our neighborhoods great in neighborhoods throughout the city. Because some folks are already starting to feel the squeeze in Milo Grogan, in Wyland Park, in East Franklinton, the Near East Side, is this movement and embracing a partnership with the county, this land trust concept. So we unveiled one of the first land trust partnerships with Community Development for All People on the South Side, and Reverend John Edgar and our partners at Nationwide Children's Hospital have been absolutely critical, because the last thing we want to do, if we're 54,000 units short of affordable housing right now, according to the Alliance, that we have so many folks that are spending more than 30, 40, 50% of their income on housing. We know that's not sustainable, but the last thing we want to do is build 54,000 units and then in 10 years have private developers sell all those things, make a ton of money, and we're out of that collective investment. And so that's why this study that's being done by Morpsey Williams here today, in partnership with not just the city of Columbus, we've got 12 suburban communities that are signed on to this in 2 suburban counties, to come up with a regional strategy about affordable housing and making sure there's housing available to folks across the spectrum in neighborhoods throughout the region. I would argue to you today, access to safe and affordable housing has never been more important to the city's future. And it is directly connected to our economic growth and development in the future. Because if we act a disproportionate amount of talented folks and continue to grow our economy here locally, they have to have a place to live. You have folks that are now fleeing San Francisco and Boston and New York. You can make $150,000 a year in San Francisco and be eligible for subsidized housing. The mayor of San Francisco, who was just recently elected, first woman of color elected mayor of San Francisco, has never been able to afford her own home.
Wow, it's incredible.
So we have this moment, but I believe this decade ahead of us will be the most significant opportunity for us as a region to buy into mixed income neighborhoods where safe and affordable housing is available throughout the region. It's not the city's responsibility. It's not just the county's responsibility. It's the entire region's responsibility.
Well, you have the luxury of being the fastest growing city in the Midwest. People are moving in here. It's one of the reasons that there is such a demand right now in the real estate market. But these are almost the unintended consequences. Can the city successfully get ahead of some of these problems? Because the population's growing very quickly.
Not as quickly as it will. It's going to grow faster. And I would argue that in order to continue to protect the trajectory we're on with economic growth and development, we're going to have to grow even faster. We as a city have grown from 250,000 people in 1950 to 900,000 today without a real strategic plan or mission. It happened because people came to Ohio State or Columbus State or Denison or Otterbein and got a job here in Columbus. I fell in love with somebody from Columbus. That's how I got my wife here, from Cincinnati. But I think we need a strategic plan and aggressive agenda around dramatically growing our population over the next 10 or 20, 30 years, and going after the best and brightest, not just from around Ohio, because we have a lot of folks from around Ohio that come here, but around the country and the world. Toronto, in the 1980s, decided that they were going to use immigration to drive their economic development. You look at Toronto in 1980, and I was just there 2 years ago at ASAE, game changer. One of the most diverse, welcoming, successful cities. Now, I think the 4th largest city now in North America. And they chose growth, but they went about it in a way that we're attempting to replicate in some respects here, having it being dynamic but inclusive.
You know, one element that we know is on the way is the new soccer stadium that's going to be going into the Arena District. It is costing the city, conservatively, $200 million. There will also be investments in garages, investments in other infrastructure changes that have to go into that neighborhood that will cost millions more. We saw this week that the city of Austin, that's getting the crew, not except they're giving up some land. How is it that Columbus seems to have gotten a deal that's so much worse took our soccer team?
Well, as you know, the day Mr. Precourt bought the crew, he had already decided to move to Austin. That's why the Austin clause was in the contract that he purchased. So he really had no other choice than to go to Austin. Otherwise, he probably would have had to gone through the expansion process and so forth and so on. But this is what I think is important to remember. This has never been about soccer for me. Public policy goals. Minority participation, redeveloping Montfray. Montfray is within a mile of 200,000 of our neighbors. I didn't want the largest vacant and abandoned property in central Ohio to be at the doorstep of 200,000 of our neighbors. Those vacant and abandoned stadiums are a difficult thing to come back from. I can take you on a walk over to Cooper Stadium if you want to see what I'm talking about. So, redeveloping Montfray into having that be the new training facility at headquarters of the crew, having it be a community sports pavilion for seniors, young people, and families in those neighborhoods right around Montfray to be able to use, and having a program with Recreation and Parks and other partners. Having transformational minority participation in the development of the new stadium and the redevelopment of that final piece of the Arena District. Continuing to grow the jobs in the Arena District that we know now is one of the largest job centers in Central Ohio. Increasing income tax revenue that will help fund cops and firefighters on the south side and Northland and the Westgate. We all thought that was important. And we believe that this is going to continue to help with an incredible return on investment into the future. Soccer is the sport of the world, and I believe it is the sport of the future. In America's Opportunity City, as we become more national and internationally recognized and known, I thought it was an important thing for us to fight for. This is what I'll tell you too. There is no city when a commissioner and an owner has decided that they're leaving has ever stayed. This city, the people of this city, were committed to protecting what was theirs that belonged to them. They're different owners, but this franchise, this team, this spirit belongs to the people of Columbus. They wanted to fight and protect it, but also make sure we were meeting our public policy goals. And it's a fight I'd take on any day of the week.
Were you shocked at the groundswell of public support during that, of the soccer fans during that entire, because we had a reporter, Dan Perlman, who was every day coming in and saying, this is what the crew fans are doing today. This is where their protest is going to be today. This is where they're having a rally every single day. The people who were fans of soccer really drove that entire program, I think. Were
Well,
you
they
surprised
galvanized
at
a
that?
movement, but it also took, absolutely, Save Crew were absolutely instrumental, and helped lead this movement and groundswell. But it also took guts from former Attorney General and current Governor Mike DeWine and our City Attorney Zach Klein to work together to file a suit against them, to block them up in court while we continued to negotiate. It was also soccer fans around the country and the world. This is the one thing I think the commissioner of the league and the former owner greatly underestimated or misread, that soccer fans around the world came to the defense of Columbus. Because this was one of the original teams in the MLS, the first soccer-specific designed stadium in America. This would be like moving the Lions or the Packers or the Chiefs or one of the original 6 in the NHL. Unspeakable, no matter how lousy those teams may be. You never talk about moving them. You never talk about moving them, or you'd have the entire...
Don't bring up the Steelers.
The league would never contemplate that, because of the backlash from fans across the country. And that's what I was really proud of, is the way that soccer fans around the country and came to the defense and fought for Columbus, for us to keep what was ours.
I also want to ask you about, we are in a city that is blessed with an amazing hospital system. The hospitals here, the medical system here, Ohio State, Ohio Health, Mount Carmel, although they've struggled. But you mentioned the infant mortality rate.
Sure.
It is higher here than in most of the country. What is it about Central Ohio that we can't keep our babies alive?
Well, it's a lot of things. I think there are a lot of folks that start to think that it's a health care issue, but it's really a social determinant of health issue. What is the housing like in the neighborhoods? What are the jobs and opportunity and transportation like in these neighborhoods where we're losing our children? And that's why I galvanized the Infant Mortality Task Force back in 2014 before I was mayor, which became the Celebrate One initiative. And we had very straightforward goals: reduce our infant mortality by 40% and cut our racial disparity in half by 2020. African-American babies are 2.5 times more likely than white babies to die before their first birthday. Unacceptable in our community and inconsistent with our values. We've made some great, steady progress and improvement there. Our infant mortality rates have come down 28%, not to that 40% yet, which raises the second issue. We purposely made the racial disparity issue the second goal, because we knew we couldn't reach 40% unless we went after racial disparity. And so we are laser focused on particularly women of childbearing age, women of color, figuring out how we can better connect, support them with housing and other things, because we know housing is so critical when mom is pregnant and in that child's first year of life. Having housing that's safe and stable is so critical. And so we're really focused on that, and we're going to continue working every day. I'm sure everybody read that we lost our dynamic, fearless leader, Erica Clark Jones, who has been an incredible, I think she's here today. Erica, will you stand up so we can recognize you for... Don't mess with Erica Clark Jones. She is the real deal and has galvanized a community around this work, public, private, our health systems, and has bent the trajectory on a 60-year trend, and we're headed in the right direction, and we're going to get there. But I'm grateful for her service, and she's going to make Adam H. an even better partner in our addiction work in the years ahead. So we congratulate her, but it's a bit bittersweet.
I know you also have worked with a women's council looking at economic, and you've talked a couple times about the importance of diversity, and that was a wonderful award ceremony, but it was a line of white men. So what...
Did you notice that?
Yes, I did. Isn't that funny? I'm observant that way. So what are you doing to be more inclusive, other than, councils?
Listening to my wife and following her lead. She leads the Women's Commission. And what's really important for me to spell out, and I say this all the time, this is not an initiative or a project. The Women's Commission and the work of the Women's Commission around pay and gender equity and improvement of health, housing, and education for women, economic empowerment for women. If you look at my policy agenda, it's the center of the policy agenda of the Ginther administration. But she and her team, Shelley Biding and other members of the team, some of the commissioners are here today. If you're a member of the Columbus Women's Commission, will you raise your hand so we can recognize you? All right, there. So specific to the Columbus commitment, it's we've asked private sector folks to volunteer to look at their pay and gender equity data. Are there gaps at their companies? So you would think, well, who would volunteer to do that? We had no idea. We're currently at 200, are we 230, Shelley? With a goal of 250 by the end of the year. So private sector companies, nonprofits that have raised their hand. How many folks have signed, companies have signed the pay equity pledge that are represented here today? So opportunity for growth here in the room yet. But the way you start to address pay and gender equity within your company or organization is to know your numbers and to know your data and have the courage to look at it.
And embrace it.
And embrace it. And own the remedy.
I want to remind you that in just a few minutes, it's about 5 till, in just a few minutes we are going to open this up for public questions. We ask you to not give us a speech, but to ask a question of the mayor. And you can start lining up over there. But before I turn it over to those questions, I want to ask you something that we talked about in a cone of silence conversation at the table. So now I'll ask you in public. There is rumor that I'm hearing from strategists from both parties that Ohio might just be written off by the Democrats in 2020. You are the leader of certainly your party here locally, and you were out working hard for the candidates, for Democratic candidates. So is Ohio no longer in play because of the way we went so swiftly and forcefully for Donald Trump? And when Richard Cordray was thought to be the candidate that was going to take over for Democrats, he was beaten by Mike DeWine. Will the Democratic Party look at this state and say, it's just not our state anymore? It's not a purple state. This is a red state. Go ahead and answer that question.
This is the question you're closing on?
Yeah.
Why don't you beat me up about the police or something?
I already did that.
I would say this. There are many, many states that went for former President Obama and previously for former President Clinton and even for Secretary Clinton in 2016, that did course correction in the midterms. Ohio and Florida did not. If your course correction is what I believe it should be, and that is go Democrat. So that's significant. The president won this state by over 8 points. No candidate has done that. I think I'll have to defer to Coleman. Reagan, maybe, was the last candidate for president in Ohio to win by that much. So it's daunting. It is going to take the right candidate. It's going to take a moderate. It's going to take somebody that can take a significant portion of the Obama coalition, but also reach out to a lot of moderate Republicans who may have sat out the race in 2016 or held their nose and voted for the president. They're very open and receptive to alternatives. I hear from them every day who are embarrassed by the president and embarrassed by what he's done to their party. But we cannot nominate someone who doesn't believe in free enterprise and capitalism and expect them to compete in the state of Ohio.
Well, then you are cutting out some of the people who are on the stage right now. So who do you see emerging as the candidate that you could I'm just.
You're relentless.
Yeah, I'm just. I have 2
Oh
more
my
minutes.
gosh! Isn't this clock slow? Who's got this thing over here?
I have some time. So who do you see emerging as that? Because what you're talking about is a candidate who can go toward the center. Mm-hmm. There are some candidates on the stage, and let's name them: Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren. They are not the candidate you just described. They are not that centrist kind of candidate. So who?
Those are your words, not mine. I would say
I think that's
that,
pretty much everybody's words.
I would say that I know Mayor Pete Buttigieg very well. Traveled to Israel with him a couple years ago. He is exactly as he appears. He's a very thoughtful, smart, engaging, dynamic. I know Joe Biden a little bit. I've gotten to know Mike Bloomberg a little bit more because of his work with cities, our city in particular, and other cities around the country and the world. You know, there are a number of candidates. I was disappointed, quite honestly, to see Senator Kamala Harris drop out. I think as that stage would have gotten a little smaller, I think she really could have shined. Unfortunately, when you're up there with, I mean, just think about the Republicans that
let's
ran
talk
when
about-
Donald Trump was running, right?
We could have an
You
entire
had
conversation
Jeb
about
Bush
finances.
and all these other, I mean, really solid Republicans with records that never had a chance once Donald Trump got on the stage. So I hear your question, and I think there are a number of folks that could make a great nominee, and I might even endorse one of them next spring. And again, you'll be the first.
Yeah, I better be. I better be. I keep looking. My time is up because I was going to force
look
you.
at that, huh?
I was going to force you into an endorsement, but I guess I'll have to wait.
You just got filibustered.
Yeah. Unless anybody wants to concede their time to me. Please introduce yourself and give us your question for the mayor.
My name is Dominique Jackson, and I'm representing Walnut Ridge.
The Scots.
Yes. But my question is, okay. Now, Coda buses are free to people who live in German Village in the Short North. There are free passes to people who are downtown workers, and the OSU students only have to pay $350 per semester for a bus pass. So what I'm asking you is, will you support free CODA as proposed by Bob Weiler, which would give all of Franklin County residents access to free CODA?
So she's asking if you hadn't heard about free transportation in Franklin County. CODA.
What year are you?
I'm a junior.
Junior?
Yeah.
What are you going to do after high school?
What am I doing after high school? I plan on going to college.
Where?
I haven't decided yet, but
What do you want to study?
I'm tied between two subjects, between going down the medical route or staying in the culinary route.
Good. Well, once you go off and earn many degrees and have great success, call Columbus home in the future. But thanks for your question. I think it's a great idea, and I appreciate Bob and many others' advocacy around this. The question is, how do we pay for it? And all the options that you mentioned before, either property owners that live in the districts where that bus service takes place pays more in order to fund it, or you have, in the case of the C-Bus Circulator, the private sector paying the lion's share of the cost of that. And so I think we just need to have a conversation as a community. Okay. Is this the best use? And CODA, I think it's important, and Joanne has done a great job, and the CODA board, and especially our CODA employees, they're really trying to go from being a bus company to a mobility provider. And so not just thinking about bus and free bus service on certain thoroughfares, but it's something that, I think we ought to continue to talk about as a community because, you've heard me say it before. I believe mobility is the great equalizer of the 21st century. Regardless of where you live in this region, if you have mobility options, you're going to be able to, access high quality, affordable child care, continuing education, living wage jobs, fresh fruits and vegetables, some things some people take for granted. Mobility is all about that. And so I'm committed to stay in the conversation and see how we would potentially fund it. But I don't just want it to be restricted to buses on fixed routes.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you. Go Scots. And that's coming from a Brave. That doesn't come easy.
Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Fox with the Pizzuti Companies, and my question for the mayor has to do with the growth in population that you talked about, very quick growth, even faster maybe than what we've seen. And I'm wondering about your perspective on the Mid-Ohio Regional Planning Commissions and Urban Land Institutes and others study on intensive development, pedestrian-oriented development around 5 corridors that would also feature transit.
Couldn't agree more. It was great work done by all those partners. President Hardin has really kind of helped take the lead on the Northwest Corridor, doing a great job working with our Department of Public Service, MORPC, and others to look at that. I think there was a significant amount of private sector support on the Northwest Corridor. We still need to identify those folks. I think our next big opportunities are heading to the east and the west, and want to make sure that we embrace that as well, because you're absolutely spot on. We can't just develop the way other cities, and there are many of them, great American cities around the country that have seen the type of growth that we're going to see over the last 20 or 30 years, that just kind of let it happen. Great American cities that are now struggling to go backwards and retrofit and plan differently for the future. We have this moment, and it is a moment. I know it's 10 years, but it is a moment in the history of this city to get it right. And so I look forward to making that happen.
Thank you.
Thank you for your question. Hi, can you introduce yourself?
I'm Ann Hughes, and I want to thank you and Mayor Coleman for your fabulous service to this city. My question is, how are you partnering with the Columbus Public Schools in order to support many of the things you've talked about?
Sure. Great question, and so appreciate your thought, because my guess is you're pretty involved with Columbus City Schools. I mentor every Thursday at West High School, and have every year I've been mayor. I've always viewed myself as partner-in-chief to the superintendent. I think we have a great new superintendent, and I think this community needs to rally behind her and work with her and the board to continue to improve academic achievement and growth in this community. And so it's personal, it's professional, ongoing commitment in meetings with Dr. Dixon, working on safety, because most of our schools, once you're in the schools, are very safe, but sometimes getting to and from schools in some of our neighborhoods can be downright dangerous for young people. And so continuing to have our Division of Police work with safety and security at Columbus City Schools. And, you know, I believe our biggest play directly as a city is in kindergarten readiness, and so we've dramatically increased access to high-quality pre-K that former Mayor Coleman started, that we've continued to grow, and in summer and after school. So continuing to fund proven great programs already in existence in the community, and really turning our recreation centers into, you know, centers of opportunity in neighborhoods, particularly our opportunity neighborhoods, which are disproportionately within the Columbus City School boundaries. But it's personal for me. I'm a Columbus City School graduate, Whetstone class in 1993, and you know, I'm passionate about Columbus City Schools. I would remind folks in the room that over half the kids that live in the city of Columbus, though, are assigned to suburban school districts. So I just met 2 weeks ago with the suburban superintendents to talk about kindergarten readiness, because many of these suburban school districts are seeing children who have gone through dramatic trauma. The transiency that maybe folks thought 20 years ago was a Columbus issue is now having an impact in the suburban school districts. It reminds me of Dr. Maya Angelou's comment that we are much more alike, my friend, than we are unalike. And I think Columbus City Schools and our suburban school districts are facing some of the same challenges. And as the mayor for the whole city, I got to make sure I'm engaged and committed to them as well.
Doesn't that also include for the suburban districts a greater percentage of English as a second language
Absolutely.
students than they had seen before?
Ever before, absolutely. Yeah, but 50% of the kids in Hilliard live in the city of Columbus. Over 50% of the kids in Worthington City Schools live in the city of Columbus. Over 40% in Southwestern City Schools live in the city of Columbus. And heck, even Dublin, I think 25% of the kids in Dublin City Schools live in the city of Columbus. So Columbus City Schools, obviously a top priority, but all the public school children that live in the city of Columbus need to be our collective priority.
And your name and question, please?
Hi, my name is Samantha Irons, and I'm a first-time home buyer in Westgate. So first, I want to thank you for the Blueprint project. I have a free sump pump, and there's no more floods in my basement, so thank you. But
You live in a great neighborhood, Westgate.
great, I always felt really, really safe. But as the gentrification happens in Franklinton, I see more and more as I drive Solvent to go home, because I live right across from the rec center. More crime. actually Friday night, there was a shootout right in front of my house. So as that happens, Westgate, I'm single. I live on my own. So I'm just wondering, what is the plan to keep the safe neighborhoods that are near the areas of crime, and as the gentrification happens, that it doesn't go into our neighborhoods?
It's a great question, and appreciate your commitment to Westgate, and I'm glad you're a new homeowner there. It's a great neighborhood. We've had some success. We put in place a comprehensive neighborhood safety strategy after our record level of homicides back in 2017. I'm proud to report that we've seen, over a 7% reduction in violent crime in the city. It's been that comprehensive approach, so it's been everything from a violent crime review group that's led by Dr. Mashika Roberts at Health, our Safe Neighborhoods Action Task Force in neighborhoods, Refuse and Public Service have launched an incredible illegal dumping effort where we are cleaning up alleyways and places in neighborhoods where crimes might be more likely to happen because they're not well lit or they're a dumping ground. So it's been a more comprehensive approach. And then obviously expanding our Safe Streets bike patrol. We have one of the largest bike patrols of any division of police in the country. And so we expanded Safe Streets, which was a pilot in Linden, to the south side and to the west side, and expanded the duration. So it's now 2 months longer than it was when they initially started, showing great results there. But to your point about gentrification, that's where the land trust and this regional strategy come to be, because we know what happens with respect to results if supply and demand are left to their own device. It is going to take a regional commitment to make sure that there are mixed income neighborhoods throughout the region and housing that's safe and affordable for everybody, to make sure that we protect and make our neighborhoods safe.
Thank you for that question. And hey, guess what? I have time for one more question. I do want to ask you quickly, as we wrap up today, if we sit here on these chairs next year, what are your priorities that will be different than they are today?
See, I think a lot of folks working the things we're talking about are big, hard things, right? We're talking about racism. We're talking about, the health disparities. We're talking about mobility. We're talking about, this is not a ribbon cutting on a park and a new sidewalk somewhere. I mean, if you're really talking about the challenges with disparity, that 2/3 of the city is doing better than they've ever done before, and a third, a short walk from here, have seen no recovery since the Great Recession. And if we don't invest in our opportunity neighborhoods and build opportunity and build capacity of those neighborhoods, that disparity is going to get wider and deeper. Third, more people to this community. So I appreciate people wanting to do an annual checklist. I would tell you we're going to be 1 year further in implementing the One Linden Plan. The Hilltop Rising Plan will be launched, and we will have private sector investors that are stepping up. We're going to make Broad Street and Sullivan Avenue, I envision them as opportunity corridors the same way Cleveland is. But it's not going to be done overnight. And if we're sitting here a year from now, I'll be happy to report out progress in continuing to reduce infant mortalities, improve kindergarten readiness, expand access to safe and affordable housing. But these aren't easy tasks. But I couldn't be more excited about the work.
All right, Mr. Mayor, thank you for your time today.
Thank you.
Guess what? We have a final question in the back of the room.
Thanks.
You get to wrap us up.
No pressure.
I am not endorsing Elizabeth Warren today. Sorry.
Jim Simon, former head of corporate communications for Nationwide Battelle. There are half a dozen cities in America that account for 80 or 90% of the technology jobs, and all of them are in high-cost areas. And so it would seem that in the next 10 years, there's a real opportunity for Columbus to poach some of those people. Can you talk about your efforts, public-private partnership terms to attract those jobs here.
Well, I tell you a little bit, but I'm staring at Kenny McDonald, who probably has a lot more detail and specific plans on how we're going to go about that. But I absolutely agree. So first and foremost, it's critically important. One of the great things we got going for our community is affordability and accessibility, right? I mean, that's why a lot of people choose Columbus. If we don't tackle this issue around affordable housing as a region, that all of a sudden goes from being a positive to a negative. And I mentioned San Francisco, and you referenced some of the other cities as well. Not only do we have to protect our advantages, we have to leverage them even more into the future as we grow so dynamically. I think you're going to continue to see, this is the bottom line. I know she beat me up about incentives and abatements, and that's her job, and I hear it all the time. I think incentive abatements become less significant in the future. Talent drives economic development decisions, job creation, and so forth. And that's why I talked about a strategic and aggressive strategy around growing our population and getting a disproportionate amount of talent in this region. You know, why was I having lunch with the president of Denison University in Granville yesterday? I'm the mayor of Columbus. Why did I spend time with Dr. Comerford at Otterbein, which is clearly not in the city of Columbus? Because I believe those institutions, we have more than 60,000 kids in undergraduate school during the course of the year in this region. What if we got 40,000 of them every year to stay? That's a game changer. And that's what I think is going to help us control the future. You know, protecting our advantages and leveraging our resources to lead the battle on talent. Oh, yeah.
Great, thank you. I hope you found today's forum as entertaining as I did. It's one of the trademarks of the Metropolitan Club that we get city leaders that come before us and share openly their plans and visions for the city, and so thank you for that. This is going to be a little different than the normal, so those of you who come here every week and expect the same speech at the end, we're going to thank the speakers, but I'm going to need one representative, or the sponsors. We're going to need one representative from each sponsor to come up so we can get our speakers' photo. So you can work your way up as I call your organization. But let's thank our sponsors. That includes Otterbein, Smith & Hale, Steptoe & Johnson, the Crane Group, Cover My Meds, Columbus Partnership, One Columbus, MKSK, ACOM, Columbus Metropolitan Housing Authority, WCMH NBC4, and our partners, Downtown Residents Association of Columbus. Thanks. And obviously, we'd like to thank our speakers, Colleen Marshall and Mayor Ginther. And our special thanks for all of you. We look forward to seeing you next year here at the Metropolitan Club.